Good morning, students. These slides cover the International Standards on Auditing, or the ISAs. Okay, the International Standards on Auditing, you should know from your second year of studies, are the standards that govern how the audit is actually conducted in practice. Okay, so it's not a set of rules, it's also not legislation, but rather a set of principles that guide how audits need to be performed. Okay, so this is similar to the IAS or the IFRS that is applicable to the accounting processes. Okay. Okay, so this topic is quite important for examinations because you could get standalone questions which test your knowledge of the applicable ISAs, or it could be part of what we had been doing in first semester when we were doing the business cycles, where the ISAs could be integrated, for example, in your testing of trade receivables, where we do external confirmations, or in any of the other cycles where the ISA may be applicable. We could integrate that with the audit procedures that you may be examined on in terms of the other business cycles. Okay, so it's very important for your studying purposes, but as well as that, and even more importantly, it's very important in practice, because this is exactly what the auditors use to guide their audit procedures. Okay, so how the auditor conducts the audit from the planning stage all the way through the execution up to the concluding and reporting phase is guided by the ISAs. Okay, how the audit is performed and the actual performance of the engagement, of the audit engagement, that is also conducted, that is also guided by the ISAs. Okay, so in general, these are quite easy marks for you to obtain in the examination or in the test. Okay, but that does not mean that it is something that should just be glossed over and not paid attention to, but rather this is an opportunity for you to just boost your continuous assessment marks or your exam marks. It's just an opportunity for you to do really, really well when you are able to study the ISAs well, and you are then able to apply it. Very importantly, apply it to the given scenario that is presented to you in the test or the exam. Okay, so you've got your study resources. Please note that we cover a whole range of chapters in the textbook. Okay, so the various ISAs are distributed throughout the dynamic auditing textbook. Okay, but mostly it is focused on chapter 7 and chapter 8, okay, of the textbook. Chapter 14 and 16 we have already covered reporting last semester when we were doing the concluding and reporting slides. Okay, so this is just a breakdown of where you can plot the ISAs in terms of each stage of the audit process. Okay, so from the planning stage, we said the pre-engagement phase, where you start to investigate the client, there are ISAs that guide that process. Okay, so that is what is indicated in the second column, and in the third column we indicate where exactly you are able to find that information in the textbook. Okay, and then again going in through the planning, from the understanding, the identification and assessment of risk, materiality, and setting the audit strategy. All of that is guided by the ISAs, and that is then included in your chapter 8 of the textbook as well. Okay, the execution stage of the audit process. Okay, remember there are two types of procedures that the auditor can perform. He can either perform tests of controls, okay, only if management have implemented controls and the auditor is able to place reliance on those controls. The auditor can test those controls, and that is guided by specific ISAs. Okay. If management have not implemented any controls, or the auditor decides to follow a fully substantive approach, or he was not able to place reliance on the controls that management have actually implemented, and he decides to follow a fully substantive approach, then there are specific ISAs that guide that substantive process as well. Okay. The same thing with evaluating, concluding, and reporting. These are the ISAs that we have already discussed and which we have specifically covered in our completion of the audit module, which we had done previously. Okay, so in terms of quality control and quality management, you should remember from your second year of studies that quality control at the firm level is governed by ISQC 1 and quality control at the engagement level is ISA 220. Okay, so during the current year in 2020, the IASB has been working on a new project to implement a new standard in terms of quality management, which will then be ISQM. Okay, and that will then be ISQM 1. Okay, so the QM refers to quality management. Okay, so the reason for the change has been to modernize the standard, okay, so that the new standard addresses the increasingly complex environment which businesses are faced with today. So the impact of technology networks and other external providers where some of the audit services are outsourced, how to deal with that in terms of quality management at the firm level. Okay, so what the IASB has done is to incorporate changes with respect to quality management, the fact that quality should then be maintained and managed as a continuous process, and encouraging the increasing leadership and accountability that the engagement partners need to have over the firm's quality systems in place. Okay, so you should remember that quality control policies and procedures consist of leadership responsibilities, ethical requirements, acceptance and continuance, human resources, engagement, performance, and monitoring. Okay, and that needs to happen at the firm level. So when we're talking about leadership, we're talking about that internal culture, okay, that recognizes that quality is important at the firm level in order to perform engagements, whether it's audit or other engagements, at an optimal level. Okay, and then in terms of the ethical requirements, the firm would obviously want all of their personnel to comply with ethical requirements at each engagement. Okay, but that needs to be driven by the leadership, okay, at the firm level as well, so that at every engagement this happens automatically. Okay, in terms of accepting and continuance of client relationships, that is asking ourselves, do we want to be associated with certain clients? Okay, so where we are establishing a relationship with a client or considering the need to continue a relationship, we want to make sure that the relationships that we have, that is appropriate associations with appropriate clients. Okay. So, and then that obviously form part of our pre-engagement activities. Okay, in terms of our human resources, that has to do with acquiring the necessary skills and competencies, and obviously also very important, the people that you hire and the people that work for you in the audit firm. Those people obviously needs to have a high level of integrity so that we are able to meet our ethical requirements. Okay, so when we're talking about human resources, that it has to do with the hiring and firing, the termination processes and the disciplinary processes as well for our human resources. Okay. Remember, for an audit firm, your human resources, that is your operational driver. Those are the people that actually generate your revenue and generate your profitability. Okay, so you have to make sure that your human resource base, that is an important component, and you have to make sure that that is of the highest quality and the highest standards as well. Okay, and that will then drive your engagement performance. Okay, so in terms of the engagement performance, you need to make sure that there's the appropriate direction, that the engagement partner is involved in the audit strategy, the audit approach. Okay, make sure that the audit takes the appropriate direction and then has the appropriate supervision in place. Okay, so that there's an appropriate hierarchy. There's an engagement partner, there's an audit manager, there's perhaps an assistant manager or a field manager, depending on the size of the client, whether it may be a listed client or an unlisted client. That will then drive your hierarchy structure that is in place over that engagement. Okay, and then your appropriate levels of review can flow from that. Okay, so for monitoring, the firm needs to establish certain policies and procedures so that we are able to monitor our compliance when the new eyes are coming out, for example, ISQM1, or whether there's any change in legislation. The firm then is able to adapt and respond to that with relative ease, okay, so that we are able to make sure that we comply at every stage of the quality control process. Okay, so we have already discussed quality control at the firm level. Okay, this then needs to be maintained at each audit engagement level as well. Okay, so where we have leadership responsibilities at the firm level, okay, for the audit of financial statements, a statutory audit, okay, that leadership needs to be there as well. Okay, so the overall quality of the audit, that is what the engagement partner should then take responsibility for. Okay, and then in terms of our ethical requirements, okay, members of the audit team need to be monitored and need to be guided so that we are able to we can ensure that there is no non-compliance with ethical requirements. Okay, and then once again, our pre-engagement activities are encapsulated in our acceptance and continuance of the audit engagement, not the client relationship. We may accept a client and want to be associated with the client for certain reasons and for other engagements, but not necessarily for an audit engagement. We may do some consulting work for them, we may do some preparation of financial statements, income tax calculations, whatever the case may be, but we may not necessarily want to take on an audit client, or we may not necessarily have the expertise to take on, for example, a listed client. Okay, and then for the engagement team, okay, we've already said that when we are hiring our personnel, our human resources, we want to make sure that we have procedures in place to make sure we hire ethical, competent people with the necessary skills who possess integrity. Okay, so when we have this pool of resources, the human resources which are available to us, when we are deciding how the engagement team needs to be made up, we know that the pool that we're starting off from is a good pool. Okay, it has the highest standards. Okay, so selecting an engagement team then would be to select from this pool those team members who then can contribute to a specific client, who have the necessary skill set, okay, to audit with the highest quality at a specific client. Okay, and then again with engagement performance, it's again the direction, the supervision and performance. Okay, but then this is now at the engagement level, so obviously we need to make sure that those structures are in place at the engagement level as well, and then make sure that the engagement is performed according to that direction that has been set by the engagement partner. Okay, and then monitoring, once again, just ensuring that we have compliance with the relevant quality control standards and then relative quality control policies and procedures that the firm itself has set in place.